Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to have a little chat about another way to motivate yourself, to get yourself back in the saddle, back on the wagon when it comes to painting, modelling, just the hobby in general. Because we've talked before about how it's kind of easy to get burnt out or overwhelmed, to get partway through a project and find that you've kind of lost the enthusiasm for it, to get partway through a model even and lose the enthusiasm for it, or to just find that you've got like too much of a big task ahead of you. Things like buying an entire army straight off the bat, not building up, but going, okay, this is the army I want, 2,000 points of whatever. Oh, I've bought 2,000 points of it and now there's a pile of grey plastic, and you get partway through and find that it's just a bit much, and it's not quite hitting the spot, and you're in a position where you don't want to ditch it, you don't want to just chuck it away and never touch it again, but on the other hand, it's kind of difficult to get yourself going again. Also, quite easy to happen when you're doing relatively small armies, but of the same unit. For instance, my Armoured Company. I took a little bit of a break from the Armoured Company, primarily because the Armoured Company is nothing but Lehman Russes currently. And I'll tell you what, once you've painted 2 Lehman Russes, you've painted every Lehman Russ. There is no difference. There's no variation between models unless you want to completely, change the paint job and vary it that way. But if you want a coherent force that has got pretty much the same thing every single time, for some reason, especially when it comes to larger things, when it comes to tanks, I find anyway, specifically vehicles, it can get a little bit samey. But the thing is, I don't want to scrap that, I don't want to stop doing that. Instead, I want to be able to push forward and end up with a massive tank army. That's actually what I'm aiming for, not 2,000 points, but at least 4,000 points. But the thing is, I know full well that if I hammer into it, I'm just going to get burnt out and I'm not going to want to carry on. But I have found that there is a way round all of this, a way that is not quite as extreme as things I've done previously to try and get through forces that I was just struggling to finish. I found previously that buying an entire army was not the way, that ended up being a project that I just sold on, that actually I lost enthusiasm to such a lasting degree that I never came back to it. I don't want that to happen again, and I've found something that does in fact completely scratch all of that kind of all of the itches of getting something done without succumbing to pressure or burnout. And that is to do something that I talked about a while ago, which is just making the thing you want to make regardless of whether you can actually use it or not. Now don't get me wrong, this is not something that can be done sustainably and constantly, at least not in my case. I'd love to have the hobby budget to be able to just make every mad creation that floats through my head, but I'm not quite there. And some of the things that I have made over the last year have in fact got a use. They are either for Age of Sigmar or something that can be used for D&D, or indeed something that can be kind of loosely interpreted as 40k models. But I've found that occasionally, just occasionally, thinking to myself, I just want to make X. I just want to make this thing. I don't know what I'm going to use it for. I don't know what I'm going to, how it's going to be functional on the tabletop, whether I'll even be able to have it as a functional item on the tabletop, but I need a palette cleanser. I've got partway through this project. It's not quite doing it for me at this point. I'm a bit bored of painting the same box over and over again. I just need something different. Something that maybe isn't the most useful model that I'll ever make. Something that I might not be able to get away with outside of the most friendly of friendly games. But I've got an idea, and I want to do something with that idea, because it's the kind of thing that will just make everything else that little bit easier, for not just having had a break, but for getting just something a bit daft out of your system. Now you'll have noticed that the video component for this video is a few different models that, frankly, for the most part, I didn't know what to do with whilst I was making them. Genuinely no clue. These are things that I built not necessarily because I had a specific purpose for them in mind, but because I had an idea. I just had a thought, I had a feeling. It was like, I just want to make this thing, whatever it is. I just have this idea and I want to do something with it. And every single time I have done one of these weird, sometimes just plain daft kind of kit bash / conversions, I found that it has provided the sudden increase in energy required to chip away at a project that is otherwise stalled. It's given me that nice little break where I haven't stopped doing hobby completely, which is something else that I've fallen into in the past. As traps go, I've fallen into that particular one relatively frequently, where I've got to the point where I just end up not doing anything for a couple of weeks because nothing that I'm doing is really scratching that itch that you sometimes get where you want a hobby but you don't know what you want to do. Your current projects aren't quite doing it for you. I've not fallen into that trap for quite a while because I now have this array of weird and wonderful creations that take quite a bit of effort to paint, have taken quite a bit of effort to put together, have taken quite a bit of planning and drive fitting and messing about with. They're all things that, really on the surface of it, either didn't serve much of a purpose or were a bit ambiguous in what their purpose would be. Things like the Sylvaneth that have got the skeletons rising out of them. On the one hand, yeah, I could run those just as Sylvaneth, and that was partially what I was thinking, but I was mostly just thinking, you know what, I would love to take some of the Sylvaneth models and instead of have the normal torsos, have them as skeletons. I'd really like to do that. There wasn't a huge amount of thought outside of it. There wasn't a huge amount of thought about it outside of that. Yeah, it's a nice bonus. I can use them in Age of Sigmar, which is cool. But that wasn't why I made them. I made them because I had that idea and I just needed to do something with it. Same thing with the Dryja Hammerdreth model as well. I wanted to make a weird nightmare creature, undead skeleton tree thing out of that model, and it was an idea that I couldn't shift, and I was starting to get a little bit frustrated with another project I was doing and just thought, you know what? I think it's worth giving this a try. I think it's worth having a go at this because it could end up as being something I'm really happy with and it'll give maybe a little break. And it absolutely worked. It completely worked. In terms of trying to keep that hobby motivation up, in terms of finding yourself just needing something a little bit different, I can't recommend following through on a weird idea enough. Like, it genuinely does something to just refresh every part of how you tackle the hobby as a whole. I've found it's not something that I used to do. I didn't used to just have a thought, have a feeling or an idea for a model and go, you know what, I'm going to do it. I never used to do that. Instead, anything that I did had to be in some way relevant to a project that I was already working on or an army that I already had. There's no such thing as just, well, I fancy making a weird walking monolith, because what use does that have? What can I possibly do with that? Instead it was, well, if I'm going to be doing anything hobby related, it has to be something that I can 100% use with what I've already got, or part of an army that I already have planned or have parts for. And whilst that can also work, it's not quite as freeing, it's not quite as effective for just building that enthusiasm back as looking at a bunch of different stuff or looking at a few different kits, thinking, what would that look like? I need to know. And then following through. It is thanks to these weird creations that I now have all 7 Leman Russes for my armoured company built and primed. They are effectively ready to go, and I've started painting another 2. It's thanks to these abominations and monstrosities that I am now most of the way through painting the Dungeons and Lasers terrain that I was sent recently, because every time I get a bit fed up of dry brushing, I go back to one of these things and continue working on it. It's thanks to particularly the big lads, the big metal lads who are going to be run as a Realm of Metal Gargants in Age of Sigmar, that my Emperor's Children has been picked up again. Started painting the Obliterators for those. Got a box of actual just Chaos Space Marines on the way to do some converting for, because it's allowed me to take that space, just a few steps back from projects that have started to get overwhelming, and allow me to focus on something completely different, something that's perhaps a bit too weird, a bit too over the top, not necessarily useful, but it's something that's allowed me to get that space and get that enthusiasm and motivation back. And honestly, I can't recommend it enough if you're able to do it. I'm not saying this is a catch-all thing, like it'll work for everybody thing, because I mean, maybe this is not the way to go for you. Maybe this would just be a permanent distraction. You'd never get back to the things that you were kind of working on in terms of long-term projects. Maybe in terms of budget, it's not that feasible. But even then, there are smaller things that you can make. There are smaller things that you can do. And sometimes a change is as good as a rest. And I think I've found that really a change in this way is far more efficient and far more effective than a rest for me. And of course now I've got a bunch of absolute freak creations to horrify my D&D party with, so there's that. Plus I'm totally running the tentacle creature with wings and the walking monolith as Tzeentch Chaos Knights in 40k, because, I don't know, I just like the idea of that. That's going to be a lot of fun. With any luck, at least one person will let me get away with it. You never know. Anyway, what creations have you made for the sheer hell of it? Is this something that you do as well? Do you just give yourself a quick one-off model to have a blast at, to give yourself a bit more drive and motivation for longer projects? Do you find that that's something that works for you? And if so, how do you use it as a way to build back motivation? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video subscribe, all that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click it if you don't want to. And as always, there's an affiliate link in the description for Element Games, which you can use to support the channel if you would like. I leave it in your capable hands. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.